I am at a bit of a crossroads. I'm coming off a massive endurance challenge, which we'll get to in a second, and I'm doing a sub only match at the end of August, about a month from now. So, where the crossroads comes in is my strength training, and I'm not really sure which direction to go with it, so I figured why not bring in an expert to talk to today who can help me out and hopefully help you out along the way. My guest today wants you to get injured less and win more matches and get a lot stronger too. Please welcome to the show Joshua Settlage, the BJJ Strength Coach. What's up, dude?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Just finished lifting and having some coffee. So, that combo makes sure I'm all good over here. How about
Well,
yourself?
I was gonna ask, is this one of those days where I see on Instagram later you're gonna have like an espresso at like 2 a.m. and then you're training and then or is
Yep.
this are you on like a normal human schedule today?
Today we did lift pretty early. We started lifting around 4, and I did have espresso this morning. And then every other Friday, me and my training partner, we usually grab coffee after training a couple times a month. So we had more espresso around 6 a.m. So I'm pretty fired up today.
I was gonna say either you're super fired up or you're like a caffeine not sensitive person who it doesn't affect you at all. Like I'm super sensitive to caffeine. I'm assuming that you're probably
Same. Yeah.
okay.
I'm super sensitive. I usually I mean, sometimes I'll have coffee past 11 a.m., but definitely not past 12. If I do, I know like my sleep is pretty trash. And
Yeah.
even more than 3 servings of coffee a day, I feel pretty jittery and I don't like it.
Yeah, there's a fine line between I need some caffeine and okay, my heart's about to explode and I'm gonna die because I've had too much. And I usually live right on that line. But
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, flirting with the edge. That's the best spot to be.
so we were talking on messages the other day. So I'm just gonna catch everybody up because they're not privy to our private messages. But I'm coming off this big cardio intensive endurance challenge. I'm competing in a sub only match in a month. And like, I'm an experienced lifter. I've been lifting weights for half my life, but I have access to an expert who can guide me in the right direction and probably help some other people along the way too. So I really just want to talk today about some of the questions I have, some of the advice you can give me, and just about structuring a plan in the short term and then in the longer term and then all that stuff.
Absolutely. I'd love to help, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we could just basically just pretend like it's just one of the clients you work with through Strength Matrix, and just pretend that I'm a new person who you don't know, even though you do know, and I talk to you all the time. But
Great. That sounds good, man. Let's do it.
oh, before we get into all that, the I told my buddy who, again, for people who don't read the messages that Josh and I send back and forth to each other, one of my buddies who I train with came to me after training and was like, "Hey, have you seen this guy on Instagram? He always starts his videos with, 'Hey, jiu-jitsu athlete,' and he's coming to me to like fact check you to see if you're legit, not
Oh, that's
knowing that
awesome.
I'm the person, like I go to you to ask if stuff is legit, and now he's coming to me to ask if you're legit. So
It's coming full
through
circle, bro.
it's coming full circle. You're reaching the masses, and now people are asking me things about you, and I have to come to ask you about the things about you. But
I love it, man. I feel so blessed that the message has been spreading, and that's really why I got into this, mainly because I kind of saw a big need. I haven't been doing jujitsu as long as you have, but I came from a wrestling background where strength and conditioning is just an integral part of wrestling. I'm not saying that the way wrestlers do it is correct by any means, but it's an important part of just wrestling culture. You wrestle, you do pull-ups, you lift weights in the off season, so it's just ingrained in the culture. Then when I switched to jujitsu about 6 years ago, I saw that that wasn't the same culture, and it wasn't even part. Not only was it not part of the conversation, but there was just so much misinformation and BS around strength and conditioning for jujitsu. I realized, like, man, like someone needs to step up and start speaking about these things and helping as many grapplers as possible. And you say that enough times, and then you realize, like, shoot, that's me. I should probably start, sharing the knowledge with as many grapplers as I can. And so it's awesome to hear that it's spreading and that more and more people are able to benefit from this type of information.
yeah, man, people are seeing it. People are seeing it. So if you're watching this and you're not following Josh already, go to Instagram and find the BJJ Strength Coach.
Yes, sir.
Um, I guess the best way to go about my super selfish conversation with you today is I did for the 3 weeks of the Tour de France in July. I rode 20% of the mileage that they rode every day, which was a lot of miles, super cardio intensive. I lifted zero weights for 3 weeks. In the couple months leading into that, I had been lifting more in like a maintenance phase. I wasn't like progressively overloading. I was just basically keeping my body moving. So what I would be doing was 3 lifts a week. I was doing like a heavy pull day with an explosive push movement and an
Nice.
explosive leg movement. And then follow that pattern. I was doing a heavy push day, explosive pull, explosive legs, explosive pull, explosive push to sort of cover all my bases.
Nice.
Like I said, no progressive overload, just, same maintenance weights all the way through. Most sets, usually 8 to 10 reps, like 7 to 8 perceived exertion. And
Okay.
then I rode my bike a lot of days in a row with zero lifting.
Okay.
So before we get into what I should do now, what was wrong about what I was doing and what could I have done better when in my last block of strength training?
I would say, and this theme is going to come up a lot in this conversation, is that we have to make sure that we clearly identify the intentions of whatever the training phase is and make sure that lines up with the vision. I talk about this all the time, talk about the VIP method, which is something I came up with a couple of years ago. Every athlete needs to have a vision. Simply having a goal just isn't good enough. If you sign up for a jiu-jitsu competition or you're doing a super fight, everybody has the same goal, which is to win. So it's nothing special to just say you want to win. You actually have to create a vision, which is a well thought out plan on how you're going to fulfill that goal. So the vision is going to dictate kind of what we're aiming towards. And then we also need to make sure that we have the right intentions going into our training. If your vision involves you competing in jujitsu, the intentions of your training sessions need to match up with that vision. And in some cases, they may not match up because your vision is something else. So in your case, Justin, you had the goal of, doing a fraction of the mileage that they were doing in the Tour de France. That is a great vision and that's a great physical challenge and that's freaking awesome. But it isn't quite lined up with some of the other visions you've had in the past about competing in jujitsu. And that's totally okay because, not all of us only want to do jujitsu. Sometimes we want to do other things. Then the third part of the VIP method is purpose. We have to understand the purpose of what we're doing and how that impacts the rest of our training. And so to circle back to your original question, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with how you were training and what you were doing before, mainly because you were super fired up. And we've talked about this. You were super fired up and super excited about being and putting in tons and tons of miles on the bike as the Tour de France was going on, which is awesome. The things that you did beforehand and the things that you do afterwards also need to be specific to the vision that you have in competing in jiu-jitsu. And so what you did previously, I wouldn't say there's anything inherently wrong or like a big red flag for me. I would say, we should always be looking to find more ways to improve or find more ways to progress training. And progressive overload is one of the most important principles of athletic development, but that doesn't always need to be weight on the bar. You could take the same amount of weight and do an extra rep. You can take the same amount of weight and do an extra set. You can take the same amount of weight and do the same number of sets, but decrease the rest period. So there's an infinite amount of ways to progress and to continue getting better and making positive adaptations that don't always require weight being added to the barbell. There are some times where it would be the best option to continue adding weight to the barbell. So what you just laid out, where you're having a good mix of doing, heavy push pull movements paired up with some explosive movements on different days, that is awesome because you're kind of covering both ends. You're covering the side of the strength spectrum where you're going to move really heavy weights fairly slow. Not that you're trying to move them slow, but they're just so heavy that you can't really move them fast. And then you're also hitting the other side of the spectrum, which is where you're taking lighter weights and moving them very explosively and very fast, which is awesome. Then you kind of go into this period where you're building a huge engine, where you're building just doing tons of miles on the bike, which is freaking awesome. Now, there are definitely some pros and cons to that. The pros would be you're probably like in the best condition possible, I'd imagine. Like you spend that much time on the bike, your conditioning is going to go through the roof, which is great. However, you spend so much time on the bike, not doing any strength training, that may mean that your strength isn't going to be where it was before. And we have to address that as we're prepping for this next competition. So my question for you would be, going into this next comp, what's the time limit, or what's the time frame looking like?
So from right now, I've got basically 4 weeks
4 weeks.
of prep for competing in a sub only match.
Okay.
And like you and I have talked about this privately in the past, but like my biggest insecurity in a jiu-jitsu match is not that my technique won't be good, not that, I won't know what I'm doing, or something will
Mm-hmm.
happen, or I'll get stuck. It's that someone will be stronger than me, and someone with
Yeah,
inferior technique but superior strength will beat me.
sure.
So that's always my big insecurity.
Okay.
So that sort of was leading me into this phase now of I had to do the bike thing. I do it every year. I
Yep.
had to do it.
Yeah.
I knew that the sub only match was coming, but now I'm like, is it too little, too late? Can we make progress in 4 weeks to where I am like optimally ready to go, and then with eyes to the next one in November, like this 4 week window, is it crash course for 4 weeks and then we do a 12-week strength part of training camp for a super fight in November? Or what is the best sort of approach there, given that we only have that like 4 weeks?
Sure. Real quick, how long is the match itself? Is this no time limit? Is this a 10
It's
minute match?
it's 8 minutes,
8 minutes?
and
Okay.
like you said, because I've spent so much time in zone two heart rate on the bike every day, an 8 minute grappling match is pretty okay right now. Like
Okay.
the cardio is there. The
That's
cardio is
great.
there. I try to say it as modestly as I can. Like I'm the best. I got
Perfect.
the best cardio in the fucking world right now.
Yes,
But
sir.
yeah, 8 minutes is not too bad.
Okay. Awesome. So you bring up a great point. We have two competitions coming up, one very, very soon, and another one a little bit farther out. So the one that's coming up first, you have 4 weeks until competition. Usually I always take away, when working with an athlete, I always take away the week of competition, because the last 7 days before a competition, there's really nothing that you can do to get stronger. There's nothing you can do to improve your conditioning. There's really nothing you can do to improve a lot of your technical skills. I mean, maybe you learn one detail, but you're not going to completely transform your game in 7 days. However, there's a heck of a lot of stuff that you can do that's going to make you weaker and worse condition and put you in a worse position to perform your best. And so we want to make sure that the fatigue that we accumulate the week of competition is very, very minimal, which really gives us about 3 solid weeks of training, which isn't ideal. I mean, ideally, like, we'd always have like a perfect 12-week training camp for every competition, but that's not always how life works. And so you do have to be in a position where, okay, if I get a full 12 weeks to perfectly dial in everything, that's great. But you also have to be adaptable to be ready to go. It's like, hey, I just got a call. Someone needs a match in 3 weeks. Like, let's run it. If you stay ready, you never have to get ready. And thankfully for yourself, you've stayed ready and you're in a great spot to maximize the amount of development you can create in the next 3 weeks. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go from 0 to 100 in 3 weeks and like start smashing all these lifetime PRs in the gym and all that stuff. That may come as you're working towards that competition that's coming up in November, where you have a little bit more time to focus on strength development, but you can definitely get in some solid work in 3 weeks. And so the biggest things that I would focus on as far as strength development goes would be pick a couple key movements that you want to focus on as your strength developer movements. So when we talk about strength training, you have your tester lifts and then you have your builder lifts. Your tester lifts are going to be the lifts that you would use to monitor your progress every few weeks to see if you're getting stronger. So for me, some of my favorite ones are the Zercher box squat, the sumo deadlift, the floor press, the Z press, and to a certain extent, the bent over barbell row. Those would be the tester lifts. Not that we can't use those exercises to build strength or to build muscle, because you definitely can. But when we perform 1 rep maxes, those are usually the 5 barbell lifts that I recommend, except for the bent over row. We usually do an AMRAP for the bent over row. So you have your tester lifts, but then you also have your builder lifts that are variations or slightly different than those core 5 tester lifts. And those are going to be the ones that help kind of patch in the holes, if you will, of some of the weaknesses that you find in your tester lifts. So for example, a say you were doing a Zercher box squat. And so you're holding the bar in the crook of your elbows. You get down on the box and everything looks good. But when you stand up, your upper back really starts to round over and you have a hard time holding that upper back posture. That would be a sign that you're posturally weak. And that would be a huge thing to focus on over the next 3 weeks. So that way, when your opponent is pulling on your head or pulling on your collars, your posture isn't going to get broken down quickly in the match. You have a lot of strength to be able to keep a rock solid upright position when you need to. And so a builder lift to focus on building postural strength could be something like a snatch grip deadlift. It could be like some Zercher pause squats or some Zercher good mornings, lifts that aren't technically a Zercher box squat, but are going to help build on some of the weaknesses that we discovered when performing the Zercher box squat. And so for you, Justin, I would select like a squat movement. You could just use the Zercher box squat. You could use a goblet squat. You could use if your shoulders and your lower back and your knees and all that stuff feel good, you could even do like a front squat or a back squat or a Zercher squat with no box. I'd pick some sort of squat movement, and I'd also pick some sort of deadlift movement that you can do that feels really good. Sometimes people, when they do deadlifts, they have some issues with their lower back, or it makes them so sore that it takes a lot of time for them to recover from those. So I'd pick a deadlift movement that you can recover from fairly quickly. And I can circle back to specific movements that I would recommend and how to perform those. But you have a squat movement and you have a deadlift or a hip hinge movement. And then the other movements that I would suggest would be a horizontal press and a vertical press. Those will kind of be your 4 main movements. And so let's say we do a Zercher box squat for the squat movement. Let's say we do a trap bar deadlift for the deadlift movement. And then for the horizontal press, that could be a floor press. And then for the vertical press, that could be a Z press, which for those who are unaware, a Z press is basically a military press with a barbell, except you're sitting on the floor on your butt and your legs are straight out in front of you. This is probably one of like the best jiu-jitsu specific exercises I've ever found. It lights up your hip flexors. It lights up your trunk and your core. You have to have a strong upper back position. If you want to, it's even though it's like, it looks like an upper body exercise, it's actually amazing for full body stability and strength. And so when you take those 4 exercises, over the next 3 weeks, you would want to perform, moderately heavy sets of those exercises and continue to build strength with those exercises and plug in accessory exercises, which could be like some isolation exercises like hammer curls, lion leg curls, one-arm dumbbell rows, exercises like that to kind of like fulfill out the rest of your training. So if we have 3 weeks and just running through this in my head, what I would recommend if I was to like, give like the cliff notes of a training program for you, I'd say one day you would do a Zercher box squat and work up to like a heavy set of 3. And whatever that weight is, do 1 to 2 heavy sets of 3 at that weight. And then when you hit that second set at the very most, then move on to a different exercise. You could do whatever other lower body exercise feels good for you. Lunges, ATG split squats, leg curls. Try to find exercises that aren't going to make you super, super, super sore. So right now, a Nordic curl, which usually makes us all really sore, probably isn't going to be the best option because that's going to dip into your recovery, and that's not going to be great. We want to find exercises that we can get a large amount of stimulus, but have the lowest amount of fatigue that's going to reside over the following days. And then for like an upper body session, you could do a floor press, same thing, work up to a heavy set of 3 reps, do 1 to 2 sets of 3 reps, and then move on to your accessory exercises, pull-ups, cable rows, bent over barbell rows, one-arm dumbbell rows. I would also, attack some stuff for the rear delts just to make sure your shoulders are feeling good and healthy, like the ATG dumbbell raise, cable face pulls, band pull aparts, exercises like that. Then you could also take some of those same exercises and do them really fast and explosively on some other days to build up some of that explosiveness, which you didn't really work on while you were doing all the cycling. So you could take a trap bar deadlift and maybe load up 50, maybe 60% of what your typical 1 rep max is, and do anywhere from 6 to 9 sets of 1 to 3 reps as fast and as explosively as possible. I would suggest, especially on the trap bar deadlift, doing going as fast and explosive as you can on the way up, and then just letting go. Just let the weight fall. That way you don't have any of that eccentric loading, which does cause the greatest amount of stress, and it can make you pretty sore. So just do the upward portion of the deadlift as fast as you can, let go, get set again, and then boom, hit a second rep, get set again, boom, hit a third rep, and then you're good to go. You can also do the same thing with the Z press. Just don't drop it from the top position, because that's going to land on your head. That only works with deadlifts, unfortunately. But you could, same thing, do 6 to 9 sets of 3 reps as fast and as explosively as you can. And that way, again, you're kind of getting both ends of that spectrum. You're getting the heavy stuff where you're working on your top end strength, but then you're also working on your explosive strength. And that would be kind of what I would start with for you, Justin, just making sure that it is very similar to kind of what you had mentioned on what you were doing before the cycling. But the biggest thing over the next 3 weeks of training that you have is making sure that you're very specific in each exercise, providing the greatest amount of stimulus with the lowest amount of fatigue. And so this is where, like, I feel like I have the most fun and nerding out on, like, okay, what's going to be the best exercise? Because we can do a whole bunch of exercises that are all great for developing strength if we had 12 weeks. And it doesn't really matter if you're really sore the first 3 weeks, because we know that we have enough time to recover and build on those things and then get closer and closer to competition. But with where you're at today, you only have 3 weeks of training. And in those 3 weeks, your jiu-jitsu training is going to be the biggest priority. I get asked all the time, probably the most common question I get is how many days of jiu-jitsu, or I would say the most common question I get is how many lifting days should I do in combination with my jiu-jitsu training? And my answer is always the same. Lift as many days as you can, just as long as it doesn't negatively impact your own jiu-jitsu training. And for most jiu-jitsu athletes, that's about 2 to 4 days a week. The key is you don't want anything that you do in the gym to begin negatively impacting what you do on the mat. And since, Justin, you only got 3 weeks, those 3 weeks are super crucial. And so if you are picking exercises in the gym that make you really, really sore when you do your jiu-jitsu training, and if that has a negative impact on your skills training on the mat, that's eventually going to have a negative impact in how you show up to your super fight in 4 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's basically like a point of diminishing returns. If you're slamming it super hard in the weight room, but you're not training hard for jiu-jitsu, like the whole point of this is to win a jiu-jitsu match. So if you're not like sport specific where you need to be, it doesn't matter what we did lifting wise.
Absolutely.
I think what you had said too is, especially in this like 3 weeks, where usually when I'm lifting, I'm not building up, like you said, to building up to that, 2 sets of 1 to 3 reps. I'm basically, even when I'm doing blocks in the past where there is like a progressive overload, I'm sitting down to go squat, and I'm like, all right, this is about where my 1 rep max is. I'm going to hit triples, and then I'm going to move on. I think in this 3 week period, that build up to where I get to that point of like, okay, I was able to get 3 and that's it. I'll do 1 more set of this. It's going to limit me from going too deep into the well and then diminishing what I can do once I get on the mat. Am I interpreting that the correct way?
Yes, 100%. So what you just referenced is what I talk about all the time when it comes to intention. So when we, talk about the VIP method, we have your vision, which is to compete in this super fight and win, smoke this dude. And we also have to make sure that everything we do in the gym matches that vision. And we need to clearly identify those intentions. So the intention of the next 3 weeks on what you do in the gym is just to get that stimulus, lift something sort of heavy for a few sets or for a few reps, and then move on. That's it. As soon as you match that intention for the day, you're moving on to the next thing. We could also think of it as if we were to run track, right? And you have it's the same distance around a track, but depending on what event you're doing, your intentions right off the blocks is going to be very, 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 very different. If you are a 400-meter sprinter, you're going to run one lap all the way around the track, which is awesome, as opposed to you're doing the 1600-meter where you need to run 4 laps all around the track. The person who's only running 400 meters, their intention off the blocks is going to be very different than the person who has to do 4 total laps. And if you're not matching the intention with what the desired outcome is, you're not going to get great results. And so if someone had if someone else had a competition in 3 weeks and their intention was to just get a solid strength stimulus and then move on so I can still train at jiu-jitsu, but then they go to the gym and they're like, you know what? I just watched some awesome C-bum video, so I'm just going to smash my arms. I'm going to do 8 sets of arms, and I'm going to do 8 sets of back, and I'm just going to get the biggest, just like, I'm just going to feel freaking awesome because I just slammed all these weights. That's awesome. That's really fun. I did that this morning and I had a great time, but that doesn't match the intention of you competing in 3 weeks. And so that does have a negative
Right.
impact. So again, it all comes down to making sure that you have a very clear vision, which you do. And then everything that you do in the gym, the intention is to make sure it always lines up with the vision and go from there.
So, I have this block. I'm going to go, heel hook this dude and get out of there real quick, and then we'll be on to the next one. If, so, like, I'm going to have, another match in this next event in November, which is a much longer stretch. And I'm not asking you to run through, like, the whole, next program, next phase. That's, a separate conversation. But is there a similar approach to where we would maybe structure things a little bit differently, split the days up a little bit differently on a longer program? Or are we more tinkering with what I'm doing weight wise and rep wise? Or you can give me the short answer. You don't have to give me the whole, this is what you're going to do in September, October, and November, because I'll
For
be hitting you
sure.
up for that later. But
Yeah, so when you have a lot more time, what's great is that we can really hone in on specific things that are going to help increase your foundation of performance. So, peak performance, however you want to quantify peak performance for anybody listening, peak performance for you may be different than what Justin qualifies as peak performance, but it really is the peak of like everything put together. So the peak of your athleticism, your in match tactics, and your skills, all those things together. And underneath that foundation, it's kind of like a pyramid. The foundation of your jujitsu performance is built on your physical capacity to train jujitsu. And if there is something that's limiting you from building a large foundation, that would be great to work on when you have a lot more time to work on it. We could also think of this from a skills perspective. If someone has great guard passing, they're a menace when they're in mount, and you better not let them take their back because they're going to strangle you unconscious. They kill it in those areas, but they have really, really weak leg lock escapes or leg lock defense, and they suck at bottom position. If someone only had 3 weeks, that's really not enough time to teach them everything they need to know about defending leg locks and everything they need to know about having a strong guard. Maybe you teach that person like a basic leg lock escape, and maybe you teach them like just how to get back to their feet. And not, don't even teach them any sweeps from guard. Like create distance, technical stand up, get back to your feet, and start wrestling again. You don't have that much time to work on everything that's going to build a strong foundation of building a strong guard and leg lock defense. If that person had 12 weeks or 16 weeks, now we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time to really go into the details on, hey, when someone attacks your leg this way, this is when you do a turning heel escape. If someone attacks your leg this way, this is when you need to jump on the hands and start fighting grips. When you're in bottom position, this is the types of sweeps that are available to you. If they shut that down, this is how you kind of get back into that position so you can hit those sweeps again. You have so much more time to kind of go into the details and increase the foundation of skills so that way that athlete can perform better on the mat. In physical development, and athleticism is the same way. So if you have a lot more time to prep for a certain competition, you have a lot more time to get into the details of, hey, in your last match, what did you feel what hindered you the most? Was it something like I felt great, my condition was on point, but for whatever reason, like my forearms just they got like pumped up really quickly, and it was a little bit harder to hang on to those positions even though I performed great. My forearms did get a little pumped up. Okay, that's important to know. Let's work on that now that we have a little bit more time to address some more specific weaknesses. And that's kind of the approach that I would take with an athlete that has a lot more time.
We will get right back to our conversation in just a minute. Just a quick break from the show for me to ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out and I would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be doing a video blog series in the lead up to my sub-only match, so make sure you stay on the lookout for that. Being subscribed will help you be on the lookout for that. And if you live in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York area and you want to come watch me strangle a guy and then have some drinks afterwards, hit me up in the comments and let me know you want to come and I can get tickets to you. There's also a link in the description to buy tickets online, which you can do that too if you want. All right, that's all I've got for you. Now back to Josh. That makes sense. When you do the analogy of what it's like with jiu-jitsu, it makes a lot more sense because, like that's my thing is jiu-jitsu. So anything compares to jiu-jitsu, it makes a lot more sense. But
yes, sir.
Having that mentality of what you teach someone if they have to survive in a jiu-jitsu match in 3 weeks versus 12 weeks, that it makes a lot of sense. I'm lucky because I have a podcast, so I can have you come on and talk to me. But for anyone, we'll move away from the selfish Justin part of the show now. For other people who want to get this information and get coaching from you, the Strength Matrix is where they should be, correct?
Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah. So I have a training site called the Strength Matrix. It's essentially a one-stop shop for jiu-jitsu athletes, and it meets all of their strength and conditioning needs as a jiu-jitsu athlete. I say this all the time, but I'm here to help you win more matches and get injured less. And so I put all the information and all the things I've learned over the years onto the Strength Matrix. We just added a free course that anyone can download. You don't have to be a member of the Strength Matrix. You can just click the link and sign up for free. It's a free instructional that's going to teach you the 4-step system that I use with every athlete to help them win more matches and get injured less. And this system is something that has worked at every single level of competition, from white belts doing their very first competition all the way up to black belts who are competing in some super tough, gritty comps with some really badass guys. It works at every level. And so the 4-step system is basically, you got to clarify your vision, which you've kind of talked about a little bit already. You have to select the right training program, which we've talked about just now. You also have to optimize your training and recovery, because it's one thing to do all the work in the gym and on the mat, but if you're not getting the most value as you can out of what you're doing, it's not going to be great. You want to really wring out the towel and get as much as you can out of all the training that you're doing. And then the 4th step is to test yourself or compete, and then assess your performance and repeat that system over and over and over. The more times you repeat that system over and over and over, the greater your performance is going to improve. It's been awesome working with athletes over the last 6 years and helping them overcome some of these hurdles. And the momentum that some of these guys get when they start implementing the system is absolutely insane. Going from, guys who were competing at the white and blue belt level, and maybe they would have they'd go 2-2 at a competition, or they'd go 1-2 and they didn't feel like they were performing that great. But I taught them the system and showed them the ropes of hey, we need to nail down your vision. We need to make sure your training is set up properly to fulfill that vision. Hey, these are the things you need to do with your sleep and your nutrition and your hydration, so that way you're able to get the most out of your training. Then when they go compete, they have all the tools necessary to feel and perform their best, and then they end up, having a double gold performance at Submission Pro Tour event and things like that. So this system is something I'm super passionate about, and I just want to help as many people as possible. So that's why I made it free. Anybody can just click the link and just download that instructional and get to work.
I mean, you're one of the most accessible coaches too. And the reason that we're talking today is because I was going to have this conversation with you anyway. So I figured we might as well just record it for everyone else's benefit too. But I know a lot of dudes just make a program. Here's a PDF, have at it. But you're constantly are talking to athletes and adjusting, and it's not just, okay, you're a brown belt and you weigh this much, here's your PDF and go to it. You actually work with these dudes a lot, right? Not just me. I'm not I'm as much as I know that I'm special, I'm not the only one that you talk to, right? I'm not your only athlete that is special.
There's a few others that I talk to from time to time. Yeah.
Okay. A few others. I'll take that. I'll take that. As long as
you're my favorite, though, bro.
To see that, this is why I have you on the show. This is why we're here. This is all I'm looking for.
That's right.
I'm gonna put the link to your Instagram, your YouTube, Strength Matrix, all that in the description below, so people can just do a click on it. Is there anything that I'm missing out? Because I feel like, as someone who comes into a 3 week training camp or where I am right now, I, I've I've fought a lot. I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time. I've lifted a long time. I have a pretty good general idea of what I should be doing, but you are the expert in this area. Is there something that I'm missing that's like I'm super neglectful of that I need to include that I'm not?
I'd say for you, Justin, you have all your bases covered. I know you're super aware of this, but we haven't talked about it for the listeners. The biggest thing to focus on, really, regardless of how much time you have leading up to a competition, is making sure your recovery is on point. And for those listening, you guys may have heard me say this before, but it's not about how much you do in the gym or on the mat that makes you better. It's about what you do and can recover from. There's something in the strength and conditioning world called the stimulus recovery adaptation curve, which is like a fancy graph to show the process your body goes through in the process of training. And so you can almost envision this like a wave. You have your baseline. Then when you do a workout, you kind of dig a ditch a little bit because you get tired and you get fatigued. But you eat really well and you get a really good night's sleep. You come back the next day and you feel pretty good. What's happening in your body as it's coming out of that ditch is that it's making adaptations. It's learning what you did and it's telling itself, hey, we just lifted all these weights. We're going to make ourselves stronger. So that way we're better prepared for the next time we lift weights. We just did these really hard training rounds at Jiu Jitsu. Okay, we're going to make sure that we're improving our conditioning systems so that we're better prepared to do hard training rounds again. Your body is very adaptable to the stress that you put upon it, but it can only adapt if you give it time to recover. And so it's a big, priority to make sure that any athlete preparing for any competition is recovering well enough, making sure they're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, making sure that they're getting in plenty of food to support not just their training, but also their recovery. Your nutrition isn't just fuel for your workouts or for your jiu-jitsu training. It also is the fuel that your body needs to recover. And then also making sure that your training is structured the right way. This is the big one that a lot of athletes miss, where they recognize like, hey, I listened to Andrew Huberman. He said I need to get, 8 to 9 hours of sleep. I'm going to do that. I listened to this guy over here. He taught me about nutrition. All right, I'm solid. But they don't always structure their training the right way to allow them to get the best results possible. As much as I love the spirit behind everyday Pohada, it just doesn't work. You can't go everyday Pohada every single day and expect to continue making progress. You have to have some point where you recover, have to have some point where you slow things down and give your body the time to make those adaptations. So whether you have 3 weeks to prep for a competition or you got 12 weeks, the biggest thing to focus on is your recovery.
I think the biggest trend in recovery right now is ice baths because every influencer in the world is pushing them. Ice bath, yes or no?
I think they're awesome. I
Okay.
love them, but they're not anything special.
Yeah.
So the thing with ice baths is that it's really like with anything else, right? We could look at this in the same context as jujitsu. We watch some guy like smoking everybody with leg locks in, 2014, early 2015. And everybody says like, this is it. This is what I'm going to work on. And so by the time I started jujitsu, I saw that and was like, I don't need to learn a scissor sweep. I definitely don't need to learn any of this dumb stuff from close guard. I'm just going to leg lock everybody. And what happened is that my guard sucked. And everybody who could see like my pitiful leg lock attempts was like, that's cute. I'm just going to pass their guard and continue to smash you. And the ice bath has the same effect on athletes. They're like, oh, ice baths are great for recovery. It makes me look like David Goggins. I'm in. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to eat. I'm just going to do my ice bath. And the spirit is there, but the application is missing oftentimes. So just to clarify the benefits of the ice bath, it is great for recovery. It can really help decrease inflammation. If you do it first thing in the morning, it can help set your circadian rhythm so that way you can have better sleep later on in the evening. There are some things about the ice bath and specifically cryotherapy that can help with fat loss. I'm not super educated on that, so I don't want to say that that's like, that shouldn't be the biggest priority for people to use cryotherapy or an ice bath. But specifically for recovery, it can help. But that can help probably like 5% of your recovery when 80% of your recovery just comes from getting enough sleep and making sure you're eating the right foods.
Yeah, do the really, really important stuff first before you do the maybe sort of important thing. But
Yes,
I also like
exactly.
an ice bath, and no ice bath company sponsors me right now, so that's my true opinion that I like them. So if you see me promoting one in 3 weeks, it's because I reached out to a bunch of them to get one for free. But I do
There you
believe in it
go.
now, so that way my bases are covered. But dude,
Yes,
I
sir.
honestly I feel so much better about what I'm gonna do in this time leading up. I really appreciate you coming on and just walking me through it because, like I said, like I recorded the intro before you hopped on, feel a little bit lost in the weeds a little bit of a crossroads where I know how to lift, I know how to train. I'm not sure how to do those things after this other massive challenge ahead of me on a short time frame. So I know you helped me out a lot. I'm sure it helped everyone else out who's watching or listening. So thank you for coming on, dude. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. Anything I can do to help you, just let me know.
I will take you up on that, brother. I appreciate it. Huge thanks to Joshua Settlage for coming on the show today and helping me out and hopefully helping you out along the way. I put the links to everything we talked about, his Instagram, the Strength Matrix, all that stuff. That's all in the episode notes in the description below, so please check all of that out. Thanks as always for watching. Subscribe, like the video. I'll see you all in the next one.